Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Falk, and thank you so much for joining us. We're very pleased to have you on a program that means a great deal to me. As I mentioned in today's digest, or at least in the write up, I spent all of my high school years in Tunisia and have frankly always had great love for the country. So let's talk about Tunisia. Well, many of you consider, and many talked about how Tunisia was really the sole success of the Arab Spring. I think many citizens of Tunisia might disagree with this Pollyannish view. Given an unemployment rate now of 18 to 20%, that's for the general population. But imagine this, for those with college degrees, it exceeds 30%. So when you take that, you take the continued threat of terrorism, you take the pandemic, which has created a horrible situation for tourism, which is really one of the most fundamental backbones of Tunisia's economy. You can imagine it really was a perfect storm. And maybe that's what created the situation that on July 25th, President Kais Saied, who'd been in office for about 2 years, he took this measure. He suspended parliament. He fired the prime minister and some ministers, and he also removed the immunity that members of parliament had had, and even a few members of parliament were put under house arrest. So, to bring some clarity to all this, I'm delighted to welcome, and let me bring them in, Usama Ramdani and Huda Zagdoudi. Hopefully, they will join. There's Usama. Full disclosure, ladies and gentlemen, Usama and I have been friends when we both had hair, so that tells you just how long we've known each other. Usama, I think you may still be on mute. So Usama Ramdani's career has really shuttled. He is shuttled between government service and journalism at the highest levels, with always a strong focus on the United States. He's editor in chief of a really good online periodical called the Arab Weekly. He's held that position since 2014, and he's also a syndicated columnist with a number of Middle East media, and often his columns appear in English and American media as well. Showing his strong connection to the United States, he earned his PhD in American Studies from the University of Tunis and then was a Fulbright Scholar of Georgetown. In 2009, he was appointed Minister of Communications, a position, however, he held for only less than a year because President Ben Ali fired him, and maybe he'll talk about that. Prior to that position, he was in charge for a number of years of the country's international communications program, where he really was the key liaison between so many of our diplomats and journalists who came to Tunisia. He was also deputy chief of mission at our embassy, at Tunisia's embassy in Washington, and he was the recipient of the U.S. Foreign Service Guest Speaker Award. Hopefully he'll come back on in a second. Usama, I want to see you. Joining
Yep, yep.
him is Huda Zagdoudi. She is a stringer with CNN International, so you've seen her on TV when CNN turns its attention not enough to Tunisia. She also is the anchor producer of a program that is called Inside the Parliament, a program that obviously focuses on the parliament, which is more difficult today because parliament is closed. She has covered CNN for France 24. She's worked in Brussels. She has a master's degree in political communication and a BA in English literature. So great now to see both of you, and thanks for being on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
So
Glad
let's
to be
just
here. Go ahead.
so let's just start with this question. Were you surprised by what happened on July 25th, or was it just a question when the water was going to boil over?
I think it was predictable, but we did not, for a while, expect the president to move so drastically and end the combined crises and the impasse. What's reality meant that the situation was becoming untenable. It just couldn't continue forever. You have a showdown between the legislative branch and the executive branch, and specifically between the president and speaker of parliament. The president would not allow the swearing in of appointed ministers at a time when the pandemic was reaching its apex. You had about 200 fatalities a day, and there were no vaccines in sight. The government just forgot to order enough vaccines on time. So it was a disastrous situation, a mixture of an inept government, a constitutional impasse, and a deteriorating economy. You mentioned the unemployment rate of about 30% for males, and it's about 40% for young girls who are university graduates. But beyond that, you have a poverty rate that was going up to almost 30% rate. You have the middle class that was shrinking. Let's put it in a nutshell. The situation was a tinderbox. And when demonstrations hit the street on July 25th, something was clearly happening, something big. There was a saying by the governor of the central bank 2 weeks before the 25th of July. He said, basically, we should expect some form of big collision. He didn't explain what he meant by a collision, but clearly the official institutions, the constitutionally ordained institutions were on a collision course, and things would not continue.
Let me ask Huda, what was it like at Parliament? Was this totally unexpected?
Yes. Yes, this is what I'm going to say, because as you said, I'm producing and hosting a program, a TV show from inside the Parliament, and I had the opportunity to be a witness, an eyewitness of what is happening in the Parliament, and how the environment inside the Parliament was like hostile to a certain extent. We saw aggression, physical aggression, we saw verbal aggression, and we saw, and you know that politics, it's all about perception. So people, you know, they are seeing Parliament as like a kind of threat to our fragile democracy. So yes and no. Yes, we knew that things couldn't continue like that. So, but we were not sure that Qais Said, the president, is going to do such move, which is really unexpectable from him. So let me go back to the question you've asked. Really, the real questions. What's after? What's after what happened the 25th of July? To be honest, nobody knows. Nobody knows, especially after the president, you know, he extended the suspension of the parliament. I mean, he grasped like all the powers. What is happening now on the ground, nobody knows. And as far as communication is concerned, he does not really communicate with like giving to the people a roadmap. So until now, we don't know where are we going. So wait and see.
So let me ask you this, because Tunisia's constitution is really a mix of, it's a hybrid. It's not based on the French model or really the American model. Did the president have the authority to do what he did?
Yes,
according to Article. Go ahead, Usama. Yeah, go ahead.
He invoked Article 80 of the Constitution, but he also interpreted Article 80 conveniently to allow him to do that. The problem with the Constitution is many of its provisions are ambiguous, and it was shaped in a way as to block any move by anybody. It imposed impossible conditions on MPs, and the MPs themselves did their best to create a stalemate. we are now in a situation, I mean, if we were a car, we would be trying to drive it on neutral. There is nobody changing gear. The president has his own pace, and he's thinking like an academic more than a politician. So the situation.
And he was an academic. Let's remind everyone that he was not a traditional politician. He was a law professor, right?
A law professor, yeah, and constitutional law professor. This is what I would like to add. In the absence of the constitutional court, the only, let's say, person who can interpret the law and the constitution in Tunisia may be the president himself. This is why even I mean, when he invoked Article 80, it does not really stipulate what he really does in the 25th of July, but yeah, of July, 25th of July, yeah. But as he said, you know, that's his way of interpretation because of that imminent danger, as he said. So this is why I'm telling you, there is a sort of lack of communication. He needs to communicate more with people to explain.
So one of the things, Osama, you mentioned a moment ago is you said the Speaker of the House. Take a moment and remind our viewers who the Speaker of the House is and why one might or might not be concerned.
The Speaker of the House is also the head of the main Islamist party, Ennahda. And one, you know, a part of the problem that emerged in the weeks prior to July 25th had to do with the Speaker of the House extending his own powers, whether it's in diplomacy or in other fields, to the distaste of the president, who didn't like it. But he did grin and bear it for a while until July 25th. He's also the head of the leading bloc in parliament, the Islamist bloc. What's interesting is that it's not just parliament that fell in disrepute. It's almost all political parties, the whole political class fell in disrepute and lost the trust of the majority of the population. But before I go on, I just need to mention, and it's important, that Qais Said was democratically elected by more than 70% of the votes. So that in itself is important to understand, that he's got some form of popular legitimacy before July 25th. He was blocked because of the constitutional impasse, but he's got his own legitimacy. And now his popularity fluctuated between 90 and 80%, which is quite high. And it is the time for him to move on with whatever reforms he's got in mind. I mean, he cannot wait forever. But to go back to the issue of the Islamists suffered a great atrophy in as far as support the country at large and also within their own constituencies, to the point that July 25th witnessed demonstrations that targeted the headquarters of the party. And it was not a coincidence, because although the Ennahda and the Islamists tried to elude responsibility for the economic failure, for the health policy failure, what have you, people perceive them as greatly responsible for the successive failures in government and in the various crises that befell the country.
Well, let me ask this, because one of the things that I think is so surprising, and maybe it does underscore this, the frustration of the Tunisian population, is, as you mentioned, the president's popularity has not really been affected by this reaction.
Um,
So, Huda, what is the feeling on the street?
I mean, the president now is like he's enjoying a widespread popularity in Tunisia. And you've mentioned the Speaker of the House. He lacks popularity. So this is a fact. And what has been done the 25th of July, Said was strong with this large popularity and people accept it. So until now, he is still enjoying great popularity, as Usama says, but still people are waiting for him because the people are waiting for him to move because they trust him. Even I mean, they trust him. They give him the credit of interpreting the Article 80, even if he doesn't do that, because we get the feeling because he's a professor law and constitutional law. See, so he wanted to stick to the constitution, but he has a great popularity. Even if he has done a coup, he will be accepted because people. He has great popularity, and in the other side, the Speaker of the House and Ennahda, they lack popularity in Tunisia today.
Well, we were focusing or have focused on the date of July 25th, but when that action was taken, the president said this will only be for a month. And that month has passed, and so he extended his decree. Is that not right, Osama?
Yeah, that is correct. But there was nothing in the Constitution that precluded or still preclude him from extending the duration of the exceptional powers or the emergency powers that he holds. He said, because it's based on Article 80 of the Constitution, it's going to be for a month. But it also says that it can be extended. The only problem, as far as the constitutional text is concerned, is that normally there should be a parliament and there should be a constitutional court. But since there is no constitutional court to review the extension, he's the only one able to interpret and to review things. So those who delayed the establishment of the Constitutional Court. And by that, I mean the leading parties in parliament, especially in Ennahda, who have delayed that, despite the fact that the Constitution said that a Constitutional Court should have been in place 1 year after Parliament was inaugurated. They didn't do it because they wanted to have to stack up the Constitutional Court with their own types, their own people. And that did not help them. That did not help their popularity. It led to the erosion of popularity and the loss of trust by the public to a point that is unprecedented within the last 10 years. Huda mentioned the fact that people they did not care whether it was a coup or not. It was not a pertinent issue. People were just fed up. They wanted the situation to be over with, and they wanted to move on to something else. And now I'll fine-tune what Huda said about people are eagerly awaiting his next move. I see it as split between the political elites are maybe divided. There are those who are impatient with his stalling or procrastinating or hesitating and thinking out what to do next. And there is a large audience of supporters who are backing him. They still believe that we have waited 10 years for something like this to happen. And now suddenly, let's not be too pushy or too fussy with the president. Let him have his time. And I think to move ahead, he still has to find a solution to the constitutional issue that he faces.
Well, one of the things, he wants to have a more powerful executive branch, doesn't he? He wants to have more power.
Yeah,
And before you respond, wait a second, Huda, before you respond, and let me again encourage folks, if you have questions, to put them into the box. I have lots of questions, but I want to hear from you. And I know some of you are on the line have spent time in Tunisia, so your opinions and thoughts and questions are very valuable. Go ahead, Huda.
Okay, I said yes. As we said, that the move, people are waiting for his next move, and I think the most important thing they're waiting for is, government, a new government, because Said said when he invoked Article 80, and he says that there is an imminent danger, he was talking about a collapse. Economic collapse of the country. And I don't think we can address or do anything or tackle all these problems without a government. So I think time has come for President Said to choose his prime minister, head of government. I mean, it's not important, but someone who will, lead a government which will be responsible economically for the well-being of the people, because we had so many things, and among also the fears of the international community. So he has to, yeah.
So one problem.
Go ahead.
There is a problem there. The political logic would dictate that he names a prime minister and he reshuffles the cabinet, etc. But the problem is due to the fact that he's himself a legal scholar, and he's very fussy about the constitutional text. And there is an issue in the Constitution. There is a provision that says that the government, to be legitimate, has to get the approval of Parliament. And there is no Parliament to give approval to anybody. So he's trying to find a way where he accommodates the constitutional text and the imperatives. I'm not saying that's the only reason. His style, and there is even now a term invented, KST, Qais Said time. Qais Said time is not regular time. When he says, it has been now about 2 weeks since he said that he'll announce the prime minister and he'll speak to the nation within a few days, and he hasn't. But it remains to be defined what's few days for him.
Well, let's go back for a minute to the Ennahda Party, because one of our members and a member of our board of directors, Kathy Kinney, has spent considerable time in Tunisia, and she says there have been articles that have noted the large gaps between the urban and rural populations. Do we see a similar gap, similar reaction to this situation, and what does that mean for the Ennahda, the Islamist party? Does the Ennahda party have more rural support than urban?
If you want to go down in the detail, you might see some discrepancy there, but the tidal wave has swept everybody, including Ennahda supporters. And they are, when you're talking about a president who receives the support of 92% of the population, I don't think that spares anybody. And then it was obvious that Ennahda, from an election to the other, was losing a good chunk of its own constituency everywhere. And the rural populations were suffering as much as the urban populations. And Ennahda has managed to keep basically its hardcore intact. All those who are sympathetic to it from outside the hardcore have basically left, have gone elsewhere. You have also to maybe bear in mind something quite particular to Qais Said, the president. The president is a very conservative person, and he's a very religious person. So by that, he's poaching into the terrain of Ennahda And ironically, he's also he has the support of the anti-Islamists, the secularists in the country also support him because he blocked Nahda. He hardly mentions Nahda in his speeches, occasionally here and there, but he mentions the Quran much more often. He recites surahs of the Quran. He's religious, conservative, and at the same time anti-establishmentarian. He thinks the whole establishment is corrupt and should be removed.
Right. So, we have this.
I think
Go ahead, Huda, and then I want to bring in.
I just want to add something. I think people who are, believing in Qais Said, because there are those who lost hope in the political class. So whether they're urban or rural, it doesn't matter. So these are the people who are following Said now. So it doesn't make any difference, I guess.
One of the things as an observer of Tunisia that I feel is that many in the United States and around the world felt that when Ben Ali was removed, it was because Tunisians were seeking democracy. To a degree, that was true, but Tunisians were really revolted by the corruption that they saw with Ben Ali and the family. Is that not true?
It's an important issue, but my claim is that Tunisians appreciate their freedoms much more than formal democracy. By freedom, they want the government off their backs so that they can do their business, whether it's formal or informal. And the formalities of the democratic process was very dear to the political elite, not to the general population. The population, true, was revolted by the corruption of the Ben Ali in-laws, but they were also revolted by the continuing economic difficulties, the lack of jobs, and the only problem is that the reasons for the uprising of 2011 continued during the last 10 years. Nothing improved. In fact, corruption became worse, unemployment worse, the economic situation, and on top of it, we faced a pandemic like no previous one, and with a level of ineptitude by the government that is also unprecedented.
Huda, do you agree with Osama? Is corruption worse?
Yes, I do agree. Yes, but during this, if there is a kind of democracy in corruption. So you know what I mean. Before we were talking about the corruption, among the circle for the in-laws. Now we are talking about corruption. Nationwide. That's it. So it's
on top of that, Huda, corruption has grown in scale.
Yeah, also, in scale. That's true.
When Said talks now, last time he talked about somebody having $1.5 billion dinars, which is what, $500 million US or so. I mean, there are figures that astonish Tunisians. That Huda talked about the democratization, which is true also. I mean, corruption is widespread.
To go back to the question of freedom, I think what we gained during these 10 years after the revolution was like freedom of speech. So I don't think nobody can take this from the Tunisians. Do not worry about that. So people are now, concerned about, the economic reforms, concerned about unemployment, concerned about what Said can bring to these people who, lost hope in the country. But the freedom, I don't think nobody can touch it. I think it's something that we have gained, and we will save it.
I'll add something to that, is this whole notion of authoritarianism or neo-authoritarianism. There has been this concern expressed by Europeans and by Americans even during the time of previous President Qais Sibsi, every time he tried to restore the prestige of the state, as he used to say, he was criticized as trying to restore authoritarianism. There was and there is still a gap that caused part of the surprise of the outside world, is that Tunisians, although not yearning for authoritarian rule, were yearning for authority. They wanted somebody to run the country. And we were left with the impression that the country was being not being led by anybody. There was no pilot in the cabin. You can do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, it's only the common people of the street who suffer the consequences of lack of authority.
Well,
now,
go ahead.
Said is going to use that. He's going to use it to probably introduce a strong dose of presidential politics. He'll reform the constitution towards that end. And if he does it quickly enough, that is, he doesn't drag on for years, he can get the support of the population through a referendum. And a referendum is necessarily now the next step with a presidential system established.
Well, let me ask you about where the EU and the United States stands. I thought it was interesting that I read last night that Senator Murphy of Connecticut, who's on the Foreign Affairs Committee, was in Tunisia with some other senators, and very few of the politicians or elected officials agreed to meet with him. I think the president said, we don't want any foreign interference. The United States recently approved, I think it was in June, 499 million of assistance to Tunisia under the Millennium Challenge Corporation. That has not been suspended. The EU has also made grants and foreign assistance. To date, that has not been suspended. So how much patience do you expect the United States and the EU to have, and does it make a difference? Huda,
this is what I was trying to tell you earlier, because I guess the international community, including the EU and the US, they are trying to urge Qais Said to appoint a prime minister, because they need someone to be held responsible, someone to run the country as far as economy is concerned. So I think the move that should be done in the next few days or weeks, or it should not take months, it's the appointment of a new prime minister.
The attitude of the West is going to be important. It's going to be influential, but it is also important to say that Europeans and Americans have not adopted a tough stand against Said. They have been understanding, and part of their understanding is due to their realization that he has widespread support, and that his move is highly popular, and that the mess that the previous governments have created in the country is so huge, it cannot be defended, not even by saying it was democratically appointed or elected. That doesn't matter for the population. I mean, it was a mess, and a mess has to stop. What one can notice in the fine print of the statements is that the West has moved away from an initial temptation to ask for the resumption of the activities of the dissolved parliament. They are not asking. They are asking for the resumption of the democratic process and of an elected parliament. So Said has an opportunity now to call for early elections based on a new electoral law, and he'll get the support of the West. The West also is willing to accept any formula that's acceptable to Tunisians. They cannot force them to accept a formal democratic process the way it was dreamt in Western capitals. The concept of democratic transition ended up looking very unrealistic and also not a match to the needs of the country. There was a political transition underway, but there was no economic or social transition. It was totally neglected by the 9 or 10 governments that we've seen.
Well, let's turn our discussion to Tunisia's neighbors. Tunisia is a small country, and you cannot often choose your neighbors. And to have Libya and Algeria as neighbors is not necessarily the easiest thing. What type of threat or issues do you see? I read that Libya, now the border is closed. There was rumors of an attempted assassination plot on the president. What do you think? Osama, you take Libya, and Hoda, you take Algeria, if that's fair. Hoda, let's hear from you first about Algeria.
Well, Algeria, it's like the big sister of Tunisia. So there is nothing will happen in Tunisia that Algeria won't be happy about it. This is the president of Algeria, he said it clearly that Tunisia will, the President Said will deal with his country. He knows what he's doing. So he will not let any other countries interfere in the Tunisian affairs. He said it, he stated it, and it was clear. The thing is, talking about threats in the borders of Tunisia, of Libya or Algeria, there has been always threats. I don't think this period is specific. So because, nothing has changed so far, really. Our borders, are saved by our military, by our forces. So nothing has changed. I'm not really inclined to say that this is a time where the security is fragile or something. No, I don't think so.
What do you think, Osama? Libya, the border is so porous.
Just one word about Algeria, and then I'll move on to Libya. Algeria is a security asset for Tunisia. It has a stake in Tunisia's fight against terrorism. We share a mountain border that still harbors extremist jihadists from Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And Algeria, since it has a stake for its own security, has cooperated and has helped Tunisian authorities a great deal since 2011. Of course, there was help from the US, there was help from Germany and some European nations, but Algeria was there when it was needed. To go to Libya, Libya is slightly more problematic. Libya in itself is in a state of chaos where authority is not well centralized, where you still got militias, you got thousands of mercenaries, and you got Tunisian extremists in Libya. And when Tunisians started expressing concern that some of those could trickle back into Tunisia, could infiltrate the border, the Libyans got angry. They said, "You're accusing us of threatening you with terrorists." Well, Tunisians were the largest nationality of extremists who fought in Syria and Iraq. I think they're mixing apples and oranges, two different sorts of concerns. In fact, the Libyan prime minister is visiting Tunisia tomorrow. Yeah. And prior to going there, he is still repeating his same, blame for Tunisians, saying the Tunisians are accusing us of being a terrorist threat, and we'll clarify that tomorrow with President Said. They face ISIS in their midst, they face lots of extremist groups, and the border now has been secured through an electronic fence and a large ditch, but still you can risk infiltration anytime, and most of the terrorist attacks that Tunisia faced since 2013, and then especially in 2015, were perpetrated by Tunisian extremists. Grant you, they were Tunisian, but trained in Libya, and they came from Libya. It remains, however, true that Libya is much more important than those worries. There are those concerns, and I think Tunisia and its friends will handle that. But economically, Libya is crucial for Tunisia, and the loss of the Libyan market and the loss of employment opportunities has weighed in hugely on the Tunisian economy in the last few years.
Well, sadly, we've seen that a large number of the jihadists have come from some countries that have had the higher education, such as Tunisia. And Dion Termini asked this question: what do you think can be done about the high unemployment among college students?
I think it's
been a problem for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt that finding the jobs will have to go through the establishment of a socialist type economy. You find lots of people on the left, and even some among other fringes of the political class, who think that it's time to review the whole economic model. But we have to go back to work. The country hasn't been properly working for not just 10 years, even before that. And the notion that has not yet sunk in the political class altogether and among its leaders, that you have to create wealth so that the rest of the population benefits. The wealth does not necessarily emanate from the state, and it emanates from a whole system that has to be reviewed to encourage people to work. Tunisia has a highly educated population that can have, if given the opportunity, they can have added value. We see the well-educated go to Europe and distinguish themselves quite well. Now, at this stage, there are not many opportunities for jobs.
So, Osama, let me bring in and ask you to comment on this. First, let me thank Dr. Jordan for the question about Algeria and Libya. But Herb Thomas asks this question, or makes a comment. Goes, stagnant economies and youth unemployment are such a common problem in the Arab world. European populations are concerned about Arab immigration, fearful about it. Has thought been given to something like a Mediterranean economic community that would address these problems? And I would just add, before you respond, that there have been studies that have shown that the economic integration among the Maghreb, Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, and I guess Egypt, is among the worst in the world. But there's so much potential. Why have these countries not been able to form any type of economic community?
Because Algeria and Morocco are still stuck in a war that has lasted now, not a war, a conflict, a dispute on the Western Sahara that has been going on for more than 40 years. And they had no time of day for economic integration. And the whole Maghreb is stuck. I mean, the whole Maghreb, the whole North African region cannot formulate a joint economic policy. Well, the potential is huge if they just get together and try to put the Sahara conflict behind them. But that's not going to happen. The tensions between Algeria and Morocco are rising, and now Algeria is cutting oil supplies, gas supplies, that used to go through Morocco. It's cut. They have several diplomatic ties, so things are not improving. It's the opposite. They're deteriorating, and there you're not going to be finding a way out. Libya could still help, could provide, if it holds its elections on time. They have elections next December, but some of the Libyan leadership are hinting a possible delay in those elections. And if elections are delayed, we might not see them soon in any case.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on that. Huda, I want to be.
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to add something. Yes, I just want to add something. You talked about the Maghreb, and I just want to link it with the solution for unemployment. I think a stable and prosperous Libya will be a big solution for unemployment in Tunisia, and a united Maghreb also. So these two things, this is why we need to have strong relations with our neighbors. This is why we need to have strong ties with our neighbors, Libya and Algeria.
Huda, I want to hear from you about what it's like being a reporter in Tunisia. How has it changed since the Jasmine Revolution, the Arab Spring?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
Yes, of course.
yeah, talk about it, please.
Yes, of course. You know, this is what I'm telling you. We are enjoying. We've been enjoying freedom for like 10 years now, to be honest. I used to anchor the main news bulletin in Tunisia, and I mean, to be honest, at that time, I feel like I was free also. So I was not concerned about that freedom of speech. Nobody was asking you to say things, but you know, we know that we are working, I mean, within a framework. But after the revolution, people are enjoying their freedom of speech. Now I'm hosting a program, so I have too much freedom. I can express myself freely. I can tell whatever I want, and I don't think that I can come back. Make a backward movement to where I used to be in 2011. So this is why I'm telling you this kind of freedom, it's very precious. Nobody is ready to give it.
So despite what we're seeing with this action of the president, you haven't felt any changes on how you cover?
Not really. And I don't think, even if there is some attempts, but no, nobody will succeed in that. Can assure you.
I want to be sure we get in this question from one of our Tunisian friends, Raouf Drissi. Do you think that Egypt and the UAE played any role in the July 25th events? And I would insert Saudi Arabia as well, Raouf. I hope you let me add that. What do you think, Osama?
Well, you can insert all the countries of the region if you want. The only thing that has evidence is that events in Tunisia drew the attention of all countries of the region. And we've seen a particular tendency, or particular propensity to support Said coming from the Gulf countries, minus Qatar to a certain extent, and minus Turkey, in a reflection of the regional divide about Islamists. But there have been lots of...
Usam, explain that a little bit more. Are you saying that the UAE and Saudi Arabia would support the president because they were concerned about the growth of the Islamic Party?
Yeah, in part, yes. But the Islamist Party was not really that much of a growing entity. But since he blocked the Islamist Party, they were seen as quite receptive. But it remains to be seen what that means on the ground. We've seen also lots of theories and lots of speculations.
I got to ask you to look in the camera if you would. We're missing. There you go. Thank you, sir.
Okay. There were lots of speculations and suppositions about outside support, but I think Qais Said acted on his own based on the situation in the country. He had the support, obviously, of the security forces and of the military, and the country would not have overcome the 25th of July events as smoothly as it did, that is without violence and without any turbulence, if it wasn't for the apport of the contribution of the military and the security forces.
I am so glad you mentioned the military because we're running out of time and I didn't want to miss this. So I'm holding an article that appeared in Foreign Policy a few days ago. And the title of it is Keep Tunisia's Military Out of Politics. President Kais Saied has broken a 65-year taboo, and that taboo is that the military in Tunisia has essentially not been involved in domestic politics. In fact, they're not even allowed to vote for president or in parliamentary elections. Are you concerned that the military is taking a stronger role in Tunisia's domestic politics?
Nobody in Tunisia is concerned, to tell you the truth. If you look at opinion polls, the military has the highest trust rating. It's trusted by 99% of the population according to the latest poll. And why? Because it has a reputation of integrity and also of avoiding real involvement in politics. It does not run politics. It is, unfortunately for the country now, the country has to rely on its last line of defense. And the military are its last line of defense. And if it wasn't the military, the country wouldn't have overcome so quickly the pandemic. They are reliable, they are professional, and at a time when the political class has shown that it's not reliable and it's not professional.
Yeah, but let me ask you this. In this article, it says, under Article 110 is Said's increasing use of military courts to try civilian cases against politicians.
It is controversial. Sorry, it's controversial, and it remains, relatively speaking, quite limited. It is not something accepted by the political elite, but it's not making a big difference. And most of the cases tried are about defamation that involve the military, and they are likely to be protracted and not to change very much the pattern of how politics are run in the country.
Hoda, how do you see it?
Yes, yes, I want to talk about the military. Yeah. In Tunisia, the military, we do have like a long tradition of neutrality of the military. And when in 2011, when there was Ben Ali fled the country, they didn't seize the power then when they can do it. They are not going to do it now when an elected president is running the country with a widespread popularity. They will never do it. I don't think so.
So we have one more question, time for that, and it's from one of our viewers. Is there not a large population of expatriates living within Tunisia, out of Tunisia's population of 11 million? Do you know what the percentage are of foreigners, and does this have influence on how the government is run?
I don't think it will bear much influence on how the government is run. I mean, you find, I think, two groups of people in the expatriate community. You find European cadres or American cadres, but you find also increasingly sub-Saharan African emigres, and both communities are welcomed, and in fact, both communities were welcomed also to get their vaccinations in Tunisia without any hassles or any discrimination. But I don't see it impacting very much on the way things go. How many they are, I don't know.
Let me give you each 30 seconds to sum up. Where do you think Tunisia will be on this issue of the presidential powers in 3 months? Huda?
I hope that we'll see a serious move from President Said in the next weeks. We would like to see a new government that will tackle the real problem of the country. As far as the international community, as Usama said, they have changed their reaction. So at the beginning, they want a resumption of the parliament. Now they want a resumption to the a parliament, elected one. So it's not the one which was dissolved. So we hope that Said will seize this opportunity with this widespread popularity and to tackle the real problems of the country.
Great. Osama, your closing thoughts.
The 3 months fall within the continued grace period of Said, so he's not going to be facing new challengers. If he has any challenge, it's with himself, bringing himself to decide quickly and move on. But he, I think, will be supported by the population and will be supported by most Western powers, who nonetheless will push for tangible measures so that Tunisia doesn't fall prey to instability or become an economic basket case. And it has a chance at overcoming both risks.
One more question for you, Osama. How is the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan being viewed in Tunisia?
Well, it's being used as an argument by political factions to say that don't put all don't pin all your hopes on the US. Don't count too much in the US because it will basically move away if it sees its interests not served. There were also some controversial remarks made by some from the Islamist fringe, saying that when you are a Muslim Democrat, you don't get much support. You get support when you do like the Taliban, but it proved to be highly controversial and went nowhere. But the US remains one of the biggest backers of Tunisia, and people do appreciate that and look forward to the US continuing that road.
Well, let me take off my objective hat about Tunisia, and Osama's known me for many years. When things calm down, folks, this is a country, if you've yet not visited, you will find the warmest hospitality visiting Carthage, the Roman ruins. In fact, if you're in Carthage, I'll give you Osama's address and you can knock on his door. He'll give you some good tea and some couscous, or you can head to Jerba and enjoy the beaches. But it's a wonderful country, and thank you both for being with us today. It's been a pleasure. And you're very generous with
Thank you, guys.
And we know
Thank you very much. We enjoyed. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
And to the rest of you, let me just remind you again that I'll be back on September 22nd with Ambassador Ron Newman. And it would be great if one of you would like to be the sponsor of that program for just $250. It really would make a difference. And keep those emails coming. Have a great day, and we'll see you again back here at the Santa Fe Council on International Relations very soon.